Hello. Sit down. I need this today. I want to come out and like hug every table. Sitting backstage there and hearing about what you're doing, it's important to me. Alice Walker, in her book, In Search of My Mother's Garden, talks about the revolutions. She said the real revolutionary is always concerned with the least glamorous stuff. Raising a child's reading level from 3rd grade to 4th, filling out food stamp forms for folks because they have to eat revolution or not. The real revolutionary is always close enough to the people to be there for them when they're needed. The stuff that you were discussing, it's not the headline-grabbing things, but it is the unglamorous work of making revolutionary change. Us in this room, right here, right now, have the potential to make transformative change, small group that we are, transformative change, not just for LGBTQ Americans, but for America as a whole. This is a painful moment for American history. But I'm telling you right now, this has been one of the more inspiring years of my life because at a time where we've seen the ascendancy of a demagogue, at the time that we have heard demeaning and degrading comments, at a time that the gains we've made on voting rights, on civil rights, on LGBTQ rights, is the time we see despicable measures being taken, taking proud, courageous Americans and telling them that they can't serve in the United States military, turning the rights back for our children, often our most vulnerable children, as Betsy DeVos and Jeff Sessions are doing with trans kids. I could go on the list of things that are painful and that can make a lot of folks feel like giving up or curling up or shutting up. But the reality is, you all are gathered here to say no, that real courage, that real hope doesn't exist in some kind of abstract. Hope is always this active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And that we're not giving up or shutting up or curling up. We're standing up. We're rising up. We're acting up. And we're going to make sure that with every despicable act, we match it with an act of courage, an act of hope, an act of organizing, an act that is, in my opinion, resonant with the best of who we are as a people. Now, I tell you, today has been rough. I literally just came from meeting with young students and adults who have survived horrific gun violence. I talked to a mother, April, as I left the room. She stopped me, and then her husband came over and her 2 other children to talk about her daughter who was murdered in Parkland. Seeing her father break down in tears before me, but seeing them still stand strong, how they have this conviction not to let these horrific shootings happen. It spoke to me because she and I are different. She lives in Parkland, which is a more affluent community. When I go home, as I will at the end of this weekend, I go home to Newark, New Jersey. I live in the central ward of the city. I live in a community that is rich with spirit, rich with character, but we're a low-income community. My neighborhood, the median income is $14,000 per household. I'm the only senator that lives in an inner-city community. I'm the only senator that lives in a predominantly Black and Latino community like mine. And to see a Parkland mom from Florida, from a different type of community, and to see the hope for my city with her in her activism. Because last Friday, a week ago today, I was at a funeral in my community for Shahad Smith, who was murdered on my block about 10 days ago. It's my second shooting on my street in about a year. Shahad was killed by an assault weapon at the top of my block. I went to a funeral with a whole bunch of folk I knew because Shahad lived a few floors below me when I lived in the same community, same neighborhood, but in some high-rise projects. And there we were all gathered together because we knew that Shahad was not the only kid from our building that's been killed. In fact, his friend Hassan Washington was killed as well. kid that lived, again, a few floors below me, he lived with his grandmother. And as I'm standing there with this family from Parkland who is weeping, but they are not home, they're not in Florida, they're here in the capital. I saw within them and their pain and their grief, I saw within them courage, hope, that conviction that despair will not have the last word. And I saw, as I stood there, different genders, different races, as I stood there, I saw that intersectionality. That their fight is my fight is their fight, that if they are successful, that it will inure to the benefit of the community that I live in. That if they are successful, the dozens of trans Americans murdered by gun violence in the last few years in our country, that we might be successful in preventing that they're successful, they might prevent the next church shooting like we saw in South Carolina. If they're successful, we might prevent the next nightclub like the Pulse nightclub. When I was running to get here and coming in the building, I was told that the folk in this room, as much as our agenda and the specificities that were mentioned, will be marching tomorrow. I love the ideals of James Baldwin, this amazing author, this amazing black author, this amazing gay author, who, when Angela Davis was incarcerated, he wrote her a letter with this incredible line: "If they come for you in the morning, they will come for me at night." This understanding that, as King said, that we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny. It's why I lost it in a Senate hearing when I heard the Secretary of Homeland Security, say to the senator from Connecticut, "Why do you keep bringing up this meeting in the Oval Office and the things that Donald Trump allegedly said? I'm here to talk about the safety and the security of my community, of the country." And I lost it because there have been about 83 terrorist attacks since 9/11. The majority of them have been by right-wing groups here in our country. The majority of them, white supremacists. And to think that people who spew hatred from powerful positions, that doesn't give license to people to kill and to murder and to maim, that doesn't give license to the proliferation of hate in our community. And whether they're hating a gay American or a black American or a Muslim American, we stand together against hate. Because folk forget. They forget that we are connected in deeper, more spiritual ways than we understand. And every moment of our lives, we have this choice to make over and over again. Is it to accept things as they are or take responsibility for changing them? And we live in this nation. What frustrates me when I stood there at Shahad's funeral is that so many of us have just accepted injustice. Go to our country's prisons and see what happens. The violence against gay Americans in our prisons. See that solitary confinement disproportionately to gay Americans, which we know other nations call it torture, what we do to young children in prison. And yet, so many of us go on comfortable with these levels of injustice in our country. And so when I come here and I say, I just need the Spirit today, I tell you right now, this is not a glamorous place to be. The stuff we're talking about, volunteering, phone calls, text messages, fundraising, but this is the unglamorous, often dull work of creating revolutionary change. And so many of the issues that I'm dealing with on a regular basis in Washington stem from this understanding that we are forgetting our obligations to each other. Gwendolyn Brooks, she said, we are each other's business. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's magnitude and bond. This nation was founded in a way that was strange, unusual, different. This country is with the oldest constitutional democracy, and I'm sorry, I'm not one of these people that just wants to heap praise upon our founding fathers. I got to tell the truth. They were caught in the racism and bigotry and sexism of their time. Read the founding documents and you see that they call Native Americans, in our Declaration of Independence, it's hallowed sacred text, they call Native Americans savages. Women aren't referred to at all in many of our documents. They were considered second-class citizens. Stokely Carmichael used to walk around and he would say, "Constitute, constitute." I can only say 3/5 of the word. But the beauty of this country, it's not the great man theory of history, the Jeffersons, the Kennedys, the Lincolns, the Washingtons, the Kings. I told the students this that I just talked to. I said, don't give in to that history book history of our country. No, the truth of our country has been the truth of folk like us, ordinary Americans who were willing to do extraordinary things for the cause of our country. Listen, the suffrage movement, it wasn't a bunch of guys down in Washington that said, yep, it's right, but it's about time that we give women their rights, okay. That's not how the suffrage movement succeeded. It was hundreds of thousands of mostly women and some allied men, like Frederick Douglass, who fought, who organized, who went on hunger strikes. Alice Paul was dragged to a hospital, shoved tubes down her throat because she was doing the same kind of activism that we saw from people like Gandhi. It was not Strom Thurmond that just decided one day, you know what, those Negro people, yep, it's about time now, let's give them their rights. No. Frederick Douglass said it so powerfully. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are like those who want the crops without the tilling of the soil. They want the rain without the thunder and the lightning. They want the ocean without the roar of its awful waters. Power concedes nothing without a demand. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. And so what's the historic struggle? What's the story of America? Yeah, our founders had some genius because they founded this country not because we all prayed alike. We're not a theocracy. They didn't found the country because we all are the same ethnicity or the same race. They founded this country on a set of ideals which they themselves were not living up to. But they said something smart at the end of that Declaration of Independence. They said, hey, if we're going to make it all, we have to have an unusual commitment to one another. We have to mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I'm telling you right now, from the time the president gave his inaugurational address to his tweets this week, I don't see that much sacred honor. But what I do see from communities around this country, when there was a Muslim ban showing up, what I saw at Dulles Airport with people with yarmulkes and sitzas cheering Muslim families, calling off with hundreds of others, cheering Muslim families as they came off the trains. I saw this in the Women's March. I saw this when they tried to rip away health care. I see this country standing up and saying, no, despair is not going to have the last word. And so what I want you to know today is this idea. Some might want to call it sacred honor. Some might want to call it patriotism. But I want to break it down further because patriotism is love of country, and you cannot love your country unless you love your countrymen and women. The fight here. The fight here is about love. And love, I get upset when people say, oh, we're a nation of tolerance. Screw that. I don't want to be a nation of tolerance. Tolerance just says I'm stomaching your right to be different. If you disappear off the face of the earth, I'm no worse off or better off because I was just tolerating your behind. Love says, I see you. I see your worth. I see your value. I recognize your divinity and your dignity. Tolerance ignores problems, crosses the street. Love confronts problems and embraces another. Tolerance builds walls. Love tears them down and builds bridges. Tolerance says I couldn't care less. Love says I couldn't care more about what happens to my fellow countrywoman, my fellow countrymen. That's where we are right now. This is the movement that has been from our founding to advance the ideals of love. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And so I want to say thank you for being servants of this democracy and our principles and ideals, even when they haven't been made real. For understanding what Langston Hughes said, that there's a dream in this land with its back against the wall. To save the dream for one, we must save the dream for all. For understanding that we cannot wait for Congress or a president to do what is right. No great freedom fighters, justice seekers, love makers have ever waited on Congress. They fought for it for themselves. They made that change happen because change doesn't come from Washington, it comes to Washington. And so I am excited, I am fired up. When I was with Kyrsten Sinema in her incredible state, she is a force, but she's not enough. We must be the force that stands with her. When I see them trying to do with Tammy Baldwin, who is I don't think this is a coincidence, folks. Of all the elected people in the country right now, the singular person having the most dark money spent against them, millions of dollars that didn't start this year, started last February, being poured down upon her right now, we've got to stand with her. This is the final point I want to make in a very personal way. I leave tomorrow, the march, to go down for the 50th anniversary, of Martin Luther King's murder in Memphis, Tennessee. And I love what it says. It says on the plaque of where he was murdered at the Lorraine Motel, it's words from the Bible, from Joseph's brothers. What Joseph's brothers said right before they took the kid in the coat of many colors and threw him into a well. It says, this Bible quote, it says, "Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of his dreams." All of us are here, not because of who was in the White House or who was in the Senate or who was in the House. All of us are here because of everyday freedom fighters, of everyday warriors of love in that love army. And I want to leave you with this understanding of your power. Alice Walker said the most common way we give up our power is not realizing we have it in the first place. Every action you take, every time you stand up for love, every time you resist, every time you contribute for love, it releases a force into the universe. I know this because when my family was moving to Harrington Park, New Jersey in 1969, they were denied housing because of the color of their skin. Every time they would show up at a house in the suburban neighborhoods, they would be told the house was sold, and they would leave, but they found this group of folk. These lawyers organized a sting operation with the Fair Housing Council, and they began to send white couples behind my parents to find out if the house was indeed still for sale. And indeed, my parents would look at the house, be told it was sold, the white couple would come, find out the house was for sale. Amazing that my parents found this house they loved, they were told it was sold, the white couple came, it was still for sale, the white couple put a bid on the house, the bid was accepted, papers were drawn up, and on the day of the closing, the white couple didn't show up. My dad did, and a volunteer lawyer. And It was crazy because my dad walks in with the lawyer makes a speech, the real estate agent gets upset, he stands up, doesn't capitulate, he punches my dad's lawyer in the face, he sticks a dog on my dad, and every time my dad would tell the story, the dog would get bigger. So here I am. I grow up in that house after all this legal rigmarole. We get into the home. I grow up in this house, 18 years old. I go off to Stanford University, got into that university because of a 4.0, 1,600, 4.0 yards per carry, 1,600 receiving yards. I was a football scholarship. Back then, I had a tight end. Now, and now I'm afraid to turn around. I used to be chiseled, now I just jiggle. 10 years pass, 15 years pass. Next thing you know, I'm a United States Senator, and I got to write a book, because that's what senators do. So I'm writing my book, I have to fact check things. I do not want to have a moment like a certain HUD secretary did when he was talking about his story. So I went to go find out, how big the dog was. Was it a dog? My father was eventually saying, son, it was a pack of wolves I had to fight to get you in here. And so I find one of the lawyers who organized all the other lawyers, an average person who gave up time on Fridays and Saturdays just to help black families, a white guy. Why was this white man helping so many black families integrate his neighborhood? Sir, tell me the story. He confirmed the facts and the details. I learned how big the dog actually really was. But I wanted to know, what was his motivation? And he says to me, I know the moment I made the decision, I was sitting down on my couch, comfortable. There was injustice all over the country. It was the 60s, but he was on his couch, comfortable. And he's watching TV. And he sees the news break in. And it's from Alabama. They're covering these marchers that are marching from Selma to Montgomery for voting rights for African Americans in the South. And he's watching it, and to his disturbance, he sees these Alabama state troopers with billy clubs flailing, with tear gas, march into this crowd and start beating his fellow Americans. He was so disturbed that he goes to his office the next day and says, Leo, to my partner, we got to go to Alabama. Leo says, you can't go to Alabama. He laughs, not because it's funny, but it's just preposterous. They couldn't afford tickets. They were in a startup business. And they just sat there for a while and thought, and then eventually, in essence, they decided, you know what, why don't we just do the best we can with what we have where we are? And they started making phone calls around, and they found this woman named Miss Lee Porter, who was head of the Fair Housing Council in the 60s. She's still the head of the Fair Housing Council now, by the way. I just sent a notice to her for her 92nd birthday commemoration. 92 years old now. She's not representing black families. She's representing same-sex couples. And so, this is the point I want to make. Marchers on a bridge in the 60s, they had no idea that one day of standing up for love would release that energy into the universe. It would instantaneously travel 1,000 miles and change the heart of a man sitting on a couch in New Jersey, who would then get up and go to work and change the outcome for generations not yet born. That is the power of love. That is the power of standing up for justice. That is the power of standing up for righteousness. We have a battle now. There are powerful people in office trying to stop us, but the truth of our country is that the power of the people is greater than the people in power. We have challenges today, and our cause is simple. We are a love army, and we will not stop fighting against hate. We will not stop fighting against bigotry. We will not stop fighting against homophobia. We will continue to fight for this nation, and even when we're dead and gone, we'll be like those stars in the sky. We see them as if they're there, but their light has traveled millions of light years. Some of them are dead and gone, but their light and the energy they goes on forever. We are stars. We have choices to make every moment and every day, to do nothing or to stand for love. Today, when my heart is heavy, grieving for a young man killed in my community, grieving and moved by the tears of parents who just held me to tell me about their child who died in Parkland, here as I stand with the memory still in my heart of the Pulse nightclub, here I stand knowing that there are people in prison right now that don't belong there, in solitary confinement now that don't belong there. Here I stand that there are still children homeless, disproportionately LGBTQ. Here I stand knowing that this country is still in progress. This country is not finished yet. This country has work to do, and we can't wait on others. We are the leaders we've been waiting for. We are the champions. Let's swear our oath so that one day this country will be a place of liberty and justice for all. Thank you. God bless you. God bless you. I love you. I love you. Thank you.